Good evening, and thank you for joining us. My name is Sarah Benitez. I'm the Vice President of Organizing and Campaigns here at Faith and Public Life. We are glad that you can be with us this evening. Unfortunate and truly saddening circumstances that we are gathered, but it is good to be in community, and we are glad that you are here with us to lament and to prepare for action in the days and months ahead. So we have a really powerful lineup this evening of faith leaders, and we want to hear from you as well in the chat. So just a few things. There will be the chat. We want to hear from you how the decision from the Supreme Court last week overturning Roe v. Wade is impacting your community, any of your laments, any of the ways you're getting prepared for action, and we'll be interacting more with you, with other folks from the Faith and Public Life team, as well as speakers on this evening. I also want to thank our co-sponsors and partners in this event, the National Council of Jewish Women, Interfaith Alliance, Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, Sacred, and Soul Force, and others who will be mentioning throughout the event. I want to hand it over now to Faith and Public Life's interim CEO, Janae Lewis.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Sarah, for warming us to the space. Again, my name is Janae Lewis, and unfortunately, I'm not able to spend the evening with you. I am in an airport waiting to board a plane, but I wanted to take a few minutes just to welcome all of you, to say thank you for spending your evening with us in this moment of lament. And I'm very excited for all of the women religious who will be guiding us through this conversation this evening. So with that, I will pass it to Jennifer Butler, Faith and Public Life founder and resident.
Thank you, Janae, and welcome again, everybody. I am so grateful for your presence tonight, and I thank you for bringing your heavy burdens and your belief that injustice never, ever has the last word. We come together tonight across faiths and across race and across place. Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Sikh, Black, Latinx, Asian, white, from coast to coast we gather, including states that have criminalized all abortion. There is compassion, there is solidarity and dignity and power in this space right now, because we are united in our values no matter how we pray or where we come from. Together, we lament as a diverse and united community of faith at a moment of deep injustice and inequity. Our speakers tonight will discuss how the Dobbs ruling will affect people from their respective communities. We know that Roe was never enough to guarantee full reproductive justice. Alone, it could not guarantee the range of support that women and families need, nor could it dismantle the inequalities across race, class, and sexualities that prevent all families from thriving. But we know that the dismantling of Roe will have a disproportionate impact on Black women, other women of color, people with low incomes, immigrants, and the LGBTQ community. And so we are here tonight to cry out together, to learn how the overturn of Roe is harming our neighbors, and to begin to build even stronger communities where everyone can safely raise a healthy family and every one of God's children can thrive. Toward that end, I now call on my sister, the Reverend Jackie Lewis, to ground us for this evening. Reverend Jackie of Middle Church in New York City.
Thank you so much, Jen. Good evening, everyone. How honored am I to share this incredible space, this organizing, lamenting, crying out space with all of these women religious from different traditions, from different social locations. It is in our diversity that we have power. The people united will never be defeated. And I'm going to tell you that I have been a crestfallen, brokenhearted, angry woman these last months, these last years. But in this time when so much of the scaffolding of civil rights, of human rights, of justice have been shattered, I'm mourning, I'm grieving. And so speaking together like this gives me some hope and some joy. Here's what I want to say to ground us. I want to ground us in love. I want to ground us in the fiercest kind of love of all. Every one of the world's major religions has some edict in it that's love your neighbor as yourself. We know that our Jewish siblings are told to love the stranger because they were once strangers in the strange land. They were once aliens in a strange land. We know that Rabbi Jesus, speaking from his tradition and let's say doing midrash on it, said, you've heard this is what we are to do, is to love God with our whole heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love our neighbor as ourself. Our Muslim friends say, don't withhold from someone that which you need for yourself. My Sikh sisters and brothers say, don't break anyone else's heart. Can you imagine the threshold of love it is to think not to break anyone else's heart? My professor, Jim Loder, defined love as the non-possessive delight in the unique particularity of the other. The non-possessive delight in the particularity of the other. This grounding in love is to delight in the otherness of the other, the particularity of the other, the uniqueness of the other. And we who are people of faith, of different faiths, we who believe in love, who believe in freedom, understand, I think, that the holy speaks to us in different vocabularies and speaks love in different languages. So in a land that says we believe in religious freedom, this issue of whether or not a person has the right to have an abortion does not belong to the Supreme Court. It belongs to our individual particularities and conversations with our beloved, our parents, our siblings, our partners, our friends, our faith leaders, our doctor. This is an individual choice. And let me ground us in this as well. We know that this injustice, this rolling back of the right to an abortion isn't about what's happening in the womb. It is about what's happening in a land that's having a battle of values. This is about so-called white Christianity, white evangelical Christianity, wanting to impose its set of values on this whole nation. So let me go back to love for just a moment. Before we had religion, the Ubuntu people, where the cradle of civilization is, where humankind got up out of the cave and walked out into the light, said, Ubuntu and Ubuntu and Ubuntu. A human is a human through other humans. We are who we are because we have each other. What's love got to do with that? Everything. My fierce love for you acknowledges your unique circumstance, acknowledges your independence, acknowledges your autonomy, your voice, your decisions, your moral compass. I love you. I see you. You see me. We exist together. This is a love revolution that's required for us to stand together, acknowledging the beautiful diversity that is human and the right that we have agency, to have voice over how we live our lives, to trust our individual lives in our communities, to make moral judgments, just judgments, fair judgments. The court has no business in our business. I'm looking so forward to hearing what my colleagues will say, how particular they'll be about policy, about faith. And I'm wanting you to listen through the lens of love. What's fierce love got to do with how we live our lives? Everything. Because the God we serve is love. And everywhere love is, God is. Let this be our cry for justice. Let this be our lament, more love, more ferocious commitment to loving each other well. May it be so. Amen.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Jackie Lewis. So beautiful. That reminder to lament and let our lament be one of love. Thank you. Next, we have Elise Higgins, who is the Director for Reproductive Rights for the State Innovation Exchange, who will be giving us a bit more of a policy breakdown about what did last week's decision mean and where do we go from here.
Thank you, Sarah, and good evening, everyone. I want to first express my thanks as a professional in this movement and as a great-granddaughter and granddaughter and niece of many clergy, and as a member of Plymouth United Church of Christ in Lawrence, Kansas, for your courage and clarity, your commitment to abortion rights, and your repudiation of the perversion of faith that is the white Christian nationalism at the heart of Roe's fall. I am going to talk to us a little bit about the Supreme Court decision, the federal response, what the Supreme Court decision means for states right now, and what it will mean for states. To start, this lawsuit, just for context, was filed by the Center for Reproductive Rights on behalf of the last abortion clinic in Mississippi. Mississippi's 15-week ban was previously struck down by different levels of courts, and the state of Mississippi then asked the Supreme Court to review both the 15-week ban and to overturn Roe. The majority, as you know, on the Supreme Court did say that Roe was wrongly decided, finding that the Constitution's Liberty Clause does not protect the right to abortion, and it adopts an originalist view of history and tradition to define fundamental rights in a way that's limited to the ones that were endorsed in 1868, which was when the 14th Amendment was ratified. It also rejects any need for abortion bans to have health exceptions, and it leaves unclear the need for an exception for the life of the mother or pregnant person. And it concludes that any abortion restriction or ban will only be subject to the lowest level of judicial scrutiny. This would undermine a lot of the court's liberty doctrine, which considers the things that we know as the right to birth control, same-sex marriage, same-sex sex, other kinds of family decision-making. And today, even, citing this ruling overturning Roe, the state of Alabama asked a judge to let the state enforce its ban on healthcare for transgender youth, claiming that no one has a right to transitioning treatments that is deeply rooted in our nation's history and constitution. So, the federal response has come from President Biden, from Attorney General Merrick Garland, and from HHS Secretary Xavier Becerra. The Justice Department is working to ensure that those clinics that are still open are protected by the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act. They're ensuring that the use of the medication abortion mifepristone, as allowed by the FDA, is still respected by states to an extent. States are not allowed to ban the drug on the grounds that it's unsafe, but they are allowed to ban it on other grounds. President Biden is focusing on also protecting interstate travel for abortion, ensuring that people can leave an abortion ban state to go to a state where abortion is accessible without being sued by their state. And then finally, HHS Secretary Becerra is focused on ensuring that in the limited cases where abortion can be paid for by Medicaid or by Indian Health Services, it is allowed. And that's in cases of rape, incest, and danger to the life of the pregnant person. And he's ensuring that all the agencies inside of Health and Human Services are making sure everyone at least has the contraception that they need, including long-acting contraception and emergency contraception. So what does this mean for states? As was acknowledged in the beginning of this conversation, there are already states where abortion is banned. Those states are Alabama, Arkansas, Kentucky, Missouri, Oklahoma, and South Dakota. Things are changing by the hour. So yesterday, Louisiana and Utah blocked their state's trigger bans for now. Trigger bans are bans that are sort of triggered by the fall of Roe. Texas today blocked their complete abortion ban for now. So services can still be provided in Texas up to 6 weeks gestation. Unfortunately, blocks on 6-week bans were lifted in Ohio, South Carolina, and Tennessee. In Wisconsin and Wyoming, care is currently not being provided because the laws there are so in flux and abortion providers are operating out of an abundance of caution. Ultimately, between 24 and 26 states are expected to ban or severely restrict abortion access past the point of accessibility. That will impact at least 36 million people with reproductive capacity who live in a state without access to abortion. It's important to name, though, that for many in this country, Roe was a right in name only. The case at the heart of our mourning today in Mississippi has the largest demographic of Black residents. And those who will be mostly impacted are folks who live in rural communities, queer and trans people, young people, working class people. And across the Black Belt, which are the southern states where the echoes of slavery reverberate in legislation that perpetuates political and social inequalities, women have, for many, many years, confronted overwhelming costs and logistical obstacles in seeking reproductive health care. Self-managed abortion is safe. However, it is not necessarily safe from a criminalization perspective if folks are Black or brown or working class, all the people that are typically over-policed and harassed and falsely arrested and brutalized by police. Furthermore, Black women are more than 3 times more likely to die in childbirth than white women, which is why forced pregnancy can be a death sentence, and why our fight against racism and white supremacy has to be at the heart of our fight for abortion rights. So with that, I will say good evening and thank you again for the opportunity to speak with you about the policy implications of the fall of Roe.
Thank you so much, Elise, for all of that just overview and really thorough and clear and easy to understand, and all the work that you do every day on this issue. We really appreciate it. Next up, I'd like to welcome Reverend Kathryn Zay from the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. Reverend Katie.
Hi, Sarah. Thank you so much for having me. As Sarah just shared, I'm Reverend Kathryn Zay. I'm an ordained Baptist minister, and I serve as the CEO of the Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, or RCRC. The kind of grief that we're experiencing is the kind that we have anticipated and expected, and yet we couldn't have prepared ourselves to feel the impact of its reality. So it's really important for us to hold space for lamentation and rage, as well as hold space for stubborn, persistent hope that grounds us and centers us in the vision of a world that we haven't seen yet, but we continue to believe is possible. At RCRC, we have a long history of brave, faithful people who have resisted unjust laws and practices to ensure that people who need access to safe, compassionate abortion care can receive it. In the years prior to Roe versus Wade, clergy and lay people formed networks across 38 states called the Clergy Consultation Service on Abortion, and helped about 500,000 people get access to safe abortion care when it was illegal. So today, in this moment, we're being asked what we are prepared to do to take care of the people in our communities and those who might be coming to our communities, and to disrupt the white Christian nationalist political agenda that for far too long has distorted Christianity and turned its sacred texts into tools of oppression, when in reality they are rooted in our collective liberation. Here is what you can do today for abortion justice. 1, donate to your local abortion fund. You can go to abortionfunds.org to find yours. 2, you can learn about how we got to this moment and how we will move forward for justice. You can visit RCRC's Religion and Repro Learning Center at rcrc.org for webinars, self-paced courses, and resources. 3, work to dismantle abortion stigma within yourself and within your community. What abortion seekers right now need is compassion and supportive care, not judgment or shame about the circumstances they find themselves in. You can visit our site, abortionswelcome.org, that we created with our Mississippi-based partner, Faith in Women, to share pro-choice, spiritual resources, and practical support for people who need abortion care right now. As people of faith, we will continue to do what we have always done. We will live into our shared values of compassion, justice, and love as we work for reproductive freedom and dignity for all people. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Reverend Katie. And if you'd be able to share some of those resources in the comments, I know that'd be appreciated, or we can. As I said at the beginning of this, we'd love to hear from those of you who are here with us in community tonight. As we hear this sobering reality of what this decision means, as we all reflect and lament together, and and stay rooted in love and hope. We want to welcome hearing from those of you joining us on how this is impacting people in your community, or how you anticipate it will, how you are feeling. We really want to have this be a real community space where we can all share in. And for those of you who, would rather hold space silently, thank you. We appreciate that as well. And next up, I'd like to welcome Rabbi Bonnie Margulies, the chair of the Wisconsin Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. Rabbi Bonnie.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening. I'm Rabbi Bonnie Margulies, chair of the Wisconsin Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice. We are pro-faith, pro-family, and pro-choice. We're coming together today in a dark time in our nation's history, when we're moving backwards to a time when women's rights, the rights of the LGBTQ community, democracy itself is under attack. As a Jew, I live by the words of the Torah, which teaches us in Leviticus, do not stand idly by while your neighbor bleeds. This means it's my responsibility and that of all who live by this precept to do what I can to provide what help I can to people whose lives will be at risk because of these destructive policies. In overturning Roe versus Wade, the Supreme Court has turned back the clock to a time when access to abortion care depended on what state you lived in, your economic status, and your ethnicity. In 1965, deaths from illegal abortion accounted for 17% of all pregnancy-related deaths. Women of color were disproportionately affected by lack of access to legal abortion care. Between 1972 and 1974, the mortality rate for women of color was 12 times that of white women. Today, the Pew Research Council tells us 75% of women who have abortions in the United States are classified as either low income or poor. African Americans make up 13% of our population, but account for more than 30% of abortions. Because of an antiquated law on the books in Wisconsin since 1849, abortion is now banned in Wisconsin. Now people in Wisconsin will be faced with the untenable choice of continuing an unwelcome or crisis pregnancy, or having to travel to another state for legal abortion care, or seeking an illegal and possibly dangerous abortion here at home. People often ask me what gives me hope in these difficult times, and my answer is all of you. When the decision was issued, we sent out a sign-on letter to clergy and faith leaders around Wisconsin to show faith support for reproductive justice. In just 4 days, we have nearly 100 signatures of clergy from different faiths from all over our state. We are releasing the letter on July 6th at a press conference in front of the Planned Parenthood Clinic in Milwaukee, and we expect a strong showing of faith leaders for reproductive justice. Margaret Mead said, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed people can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." Thank you all for being that small group of thoughtful, committed people. I look forward to being with you as together we change the world. Ken Yehi Ratzon, may that be God's will. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Bonnie, and thank you to for your leadership and those of all of the clergy in Wisconsin, and to all of the leaders joining us tonight. Next, we will hear from Angela Tyler Williams, the co-director for Movement Building for Sacred. Reverend Angela? Oh, you're still muted, Reverend Angela.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for that reminder. Good evening. I'm Reverend Angela Williams, and I am the co-director for Movement Building at Sacred, the spiritual alliance of communities for reproductive dignity. We are an alliance of organizers, religious leaders, academics, and congregations working together to advance the cause of reproductive justice through congregational designation and community building programs. I can't help but take the time to recognize that today we are gathering on the 53rd anniversary of the Stonewall riots. I follow my movement lineage back to the trans women of color who started that riot and to the people of faith who have struggled for inclusion in and out of faith spaces for over 5 decades. Now is the time when we must come together across movements. There is far too much at stake. We know that trans folks are under attack. Abortion access is absolutely obliterated. And we need each other because these attacks from the state are targeting all of us. As I have learned from womanist teachings, we worship a God who makes a way when there is no way. Now is the time to co-create spaces of liberation from patriarchal theologies that erase and devalue the enormous role of women and those who can become pregnant in the matters of reproduction. I want us to cling to the hope that we have, that others have named already, the hope that comes from deep within our bones, the hope that comes from our ancestors, from those in our families, our chosen families, in our traditions and in our movements, those who came before us and survived unconscionable trauma. We are built of thicker stuff than any Supreme Court opinion. However you are feeling in this moment, I invite you to lean into that. Feel all of the feelings that come up. Cry all the tears that need to be shed. Yell and scream into the abyss. Call a friend. Check in with each other and take deep breaths. So now what? Dig in. This work is going to take so much more time. Follow Sacred online at sacred_repro or on our website, sacreddignity.org. We've got actions for people of faith and congregations to take. Donate to abortion funds and independent abortion providers who are on the front lines trying to get folks the care that they need. Provide spiritual care for those around you. Create and hold spaces like this where we can share our faith stories and our reproductive stories together so that we can bust the shame, judgment, and stigma around abortion and reproduction. Build community. Center those most impacted and start making action plans with your networks. We need all of us in this struggle together. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Reverend Angela, both for speaking such profound words to us on your birthday and for being with us today, and also for that very powerful reminder about the anniversary of Stonewall and the trans women of color who started that movement that overlaps very much with this movement and the work that we are doing together today. I'd like to now welcome Bishop Tanya Rawls from the Freedom Center for Social Justice.
Good evening. I am Bishop Tanya Rawls. I'm founder and executive director of the Freedom Center for Social Justice in Charlotte, North Carolina, and also pastor of Sacred Souls United Church of Christ, also in Charlotte. I am sitting in full lament today, and as I have been since the decision about overturning Roe v. Wade. I am a woman of a certain age, as I just turned 64 a week or so ago, where I remember a lot in reference to the times prior to Roe v. Wade. I remembered the women in my community that I grew up in Newark, New Jersey, gathering in the kitchen, and at the time being young and not fully understanding what it meant when they had conversations about one of them being in the way, or the way being something that they were grappling with together as they sat in the kitchen and trying to work with each other, sorting out what we would do, what they would do in support of one another. I thought about a lot about Jesus and his journey with us here in the earth realm. and how he kept getting in trouble primarily from religious leaders or the white supremacists of his day in the kind of symbolic sense of it, because he was always moved by the human condition. Jesus always went to the human condition. If you look at every miracle, every prophecy, the prophetic words he spoke, but also the parables that he spoke, it was about helping people within the human condition. Today, I don't have on a collar. I have on a t-shirt that you can't see fully, but it says liberate. And that liberate is tied to why I feel hope in the midst of my lament. The hope that I feel is because as a Black, out, lesbian bishop and woman of color that has lived as such for the number of years I have, what I know is that the seemingly impossible is possible when we come together, particularly as people of faith, and understand that faith is that gap between what we have and what we understand and what we need. It is in this space that now we must together, yes, lament, but also gird our loins and prepare ourselves to fight. What I celebrate is we no longer have to settle. We can use our voices, but we can also use our votes. I also am encouraged by those who are on this call, other faith leaders from varied other traditions, and understanding that we can do this. Together as a nation, we can say no to white supremacist views. We can say no to those who would dare to deny the right of families to make choices about what is best for them. We don't get to impose upon others that which Jesus himself, from the Christian faith, did not choose to impose. We even have to choose Jesus. So if we get to choose Jesus, then when we think about those who dare to suggest that this decision is based on morality, my question would be, whose moral compass are you using? Let us center our work. The Freedom Center for Social Justice focuses on culture shifts, and we work at those intersections of faith and social justice, sexual orientation, and gender identity. Because what I find as I am out fighting and standing for justice is we're fighting against the same foes over and over and over again. So whether or not we were talking about health care for all, or we are talking about benefits to those who have need, we want them to have children, some of them say, but then once the child is born, are they also willing to fight as fervently for that child to have access to health care, to have pre-K, to have child care support? And in most instances, that answer is a resounding no. We must stand and fight. We must lament, yes, but we must lament in ways that we put action to the tears. I celebrate this moment, the work of the Freedom Center for Social Justice that we're doing, centering the South in particular, and encourage you to visit fcsj.org for more information in terms of ways you can support there. But also, as others have said, we must support those who are still standing. So sending donations to those clinics, and most of all, supporting each other in these trying times. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so very much, Bishop Tanya. I'm so grateful you could join us tonight. Next, we will hear from Reverend Alba Onofrio, Co-Executive Director of Soulforce. Oh, you're muted, Reverend Alba. Oh. There. No, it might be an issue with your mic. Do you want to let's see. No. How about we'll come back to you. We'll try to figure that out. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. We'd love to, as I said before, we really want to hear from you on how you're feeling, how this is impacting your community, how you think it will impact your community, especially as a person of faith. So next, we will hear from Rabbi Dania Ruttenberg with the National Council of Jewish Women. Rabbi Dania?
Hi.
Hello.
Excuse me. Can you hear me okay? When the Israelites were freed from enslavement and had the opportunity to create a new society built in justice, they were told again and again and again to care for the widow and the orphan and the stranger. And you see this again and again and again in what I call the Torah, what some people call the 5 books of Moses or the Pentateuch, right? The widow, the orphan, the stranger. And that is ancient intersectionality, right? The reminder that we always have to make sure that our society is whole and that some people are going to be more vulnerable in poverty or in any situation because of their gender, because of their marital status, because of their parental status and age, because of their national status and their access to systems of care and language or whatever, right? That we know that the intersection of several things can suddenly change everything, and that every time harm happens, that matters. We already know that restricting abortion access disproportionately impacts people who are already marginalized in our society, like women, people who are struggling financially, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color communities, young people, people in rural communities, immigrants, disabled people, trans and non-binary people. Right. We already know that people who are denied access to reproductive health care are more likely to be trapped in poverty and to remain in abusive relationships as a result of that denied care. Right. We know that a national abortion ban would lead to a 21% rise in the number of overall pregnancy-related deaths and a 33% rise in such deaths among Black women because of systemic racism in healthcare and beyond. Right. And the Torah teaches us again and again, keep your eyes on who is most impacted by harm. Keep your eyes there and remember that these things are always interconnected. Remember that intimate partner violence goes through the roof during pregnancy. Remember that homicide is the leading cause of death in pregnant people. Pregnant and postpartum people are twice as likely to die by homicide than by any other leading cause of maternal mortality. We know that abortion care saves lives. And we know that white supremacy, trans liberation, queer liberation, abortion justice, and birth control access are all bound up together as one. Right? As we've already heard, they are all connected. It's all about whose body, whose rights, whose safety matters, who has agency, who has power, who is in control, who decides what freedom is, who gets dignity, who gets wholeness, whose life counts, who's disposable, who decides, who is decided for. This fight for abortion justice, for reproductive health agency, is a fight for safety. It is a fight for life. It is a reproductive, it is a racial justice fight. It is an economic justice fight. Right? It is a fight that touches every single issue. It is a trans justice fight. It is a queer justice fight. It is for all of us. It is with all of us. And we must all be together. We must all show up, stand up, understand that all of our liberation is bound up together. This is the time. This has been the time. It has been the time. And it's the time. It says in Pirkei Avot, sayings of the sages, one of our teachings, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmo, avalo ata ben achorim levatel mimena. You are not required to finish the work all by yourself, right? But you can't give up on it. And so we must keep going forward. We take care of people today and we fight for a more just tomorrow. We take care of people today and we fight for a more just tomorrow. And we remember that all of our liberation is bound up together. And we get every single person the care that they need. And we make every change that we can to better medication abortion laws, to better state laws on every plane in every way. We fight for trans rights. We fight against white supremacy. And we're going to do it all together, because that will be the way that we win.
So powerful, and absolutely, this is the time, and we will do it together. Thank you, Rabbi Dania. Next, we will hear from Reverend Dr. Catherine Henderson with the Interfaith Alliance.
Good evening, everyone. I am here not only as a Christian minister, but also as a woman who wrestled with and exercised my freedom of conscience and moral choice to have an abortion. So the Supreme Court's decision this week to deny those basic rights, not only protected by the Constitution, but also given by God, grieves my heart. Every pregnant person should be able to make the decisions about their body and their family as I was able to do. The Supreme Court decisions this week, and this is part of the work of the Interfaith Alliance that we're focused on, Roe, but also Carson and Bremerton, are a gross violation of the separation of church and state and of true religious freedom that is neutral and non-coercive and non-discriminatory, balanced and pluralistic. They represent a cruel abuse of power by those who find it easier to care for the unborn than to care for the living. Their decisions have unleashed pain and death and trauma, certainly to individuals, but also to the country as a whole, that will now be even more divided state by state. And we have been here in this divided place before. A toxic white bread nationalism in the guise of Christianity is nothing new. When I am brought low in times of lament, panic, and paralysis like this, these words from one of my Christian texts come to my mind, and I offer them to you this evening. For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of sound mind. So this is my hope for us, beloved friends and partners on this call, for the many who took more risks than usual in preaching last weekend to speak truth, for those who marched in the streets and on social media, and for all of us who want to act with impact. My hope is that we will face down that spirit of fear that gets inside us, that we will use whatever power we have and urge others to do so as well. That we in this progressive, multiracial, multi-faith justice space will exercise love and respect for each other more and more, and appreciation for the organizations we represent. We really need each other more than ever. As the song goes, I need you to survive. And as the great pastor, the Reverend Dr. James Forbes would say, this is no time for foolishness. And finally, I hope that we will be of sound mind, which means wisdom, clarity, moral imagination, and good enough strategy that is not manipulated by fear. Bless all of us. Bless you. Thanks.
Thank you. Next, we will hear from Reverend Alba Onofrio, the co-executive director of Soul Force. Thank you for your flexibility and patience.
Thank y'all for your flexibility with my microphone. Oh, beloveds, we are in a moment, aren't we? Many of us saw this coming. Some of us didn't. We have this space of, Dios mío, my God, what is going on? What do we do? What do we do next? We may feel so alone in this moment. And it is the work of white Christian supremacy that tells us that we are alone, that we have this world to face singularly, that our failures are personal, that our wins are individual, and yet that couldn't be farther from the truth. White Christian supremacy says that this is an issue only for women, only for people with uteruses, only for those who are having a relationship that could end in having a child, in needing an abortion. All of those are not true. We as queer people, we as people of color, we as immigrants, we as working class people, we as Appalachians, I am coming to you now from deep in the Appalachian Mountains of North Carolina. We know that that is not the case. We are complex beings. We hold worlds and universes in our hearts, in our souls, in our bodies, in our genes, in our lives, and in our legacies. So let us remember, as Ecclesiastes tells us, that there is a season for everything under heaven. Let us sit with the lament. Let us be in the pain of this moment when we feel, many of us, betrayed by our brothers and sisters, when we feel like all of this work that we have done has been in vain. Let us be with that feeling. Let us know the depths of that hurt. But let us not spend so much time in the feelings that feel like they drown us and our ability to find peace and joy and love. Let us focus on what we need to sit our feelings in this moment and yet to be able to move again in formation. We know so many folks have been doing so much work around this issue. We at Soulforce work on ideological change, on white Christian supremacy at the intersections of gender, sexuality, and the Christian religion. We have lots of resources if you are interested. For example, one of our resources, the model of biblical motherhood, helps those of us who are looking for a Bible-based understanding of being pro-reproductive choice. We invite you to find whatever those resources are, but know that we are in this for the long haul and we are in it together. It is a movement that moves best together. We need you to care for your own soul, and our goal always is finding ourselves amongst people with indomitable spirits, that no matter what happens in the political world, in the social world, that we know that we are made in the image of the divine, and therefore we have sacred inalienable rights to our lives, to the fullness and wholeness of our lives. So may we cultivate spirits of resistance that can be in this lucha, in this fight, in this struggle for the long haul, because we need each other. We need you. Please take good care of your own spirit, of your own heart, of your own soul, and know that no matter what, you are not alone. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. And thank you so much. We're so glad you were able to come back and join us. Next, we will hear from Dr. Tarunjit Singh Bhutalia with Religions for Peace USA. Welcome.
Thank you, Sarah. And dear brother and sisters in faith and conscience, I am Tarunjit Singh Bhutalia and I serve as the Executive Director of Religions for Peace USA. It is an honor for me to be the first man to speak today so I can stand with our sisters, our daughters, our spouses, our mothers, our significant others, and all women. I am deeply disappointed with the US Supreme Court's ruling about mandating reproductive decisions for women. This decision will negatively impact all women, especially women of color and those from marginalized communities. If this ruling stands and our US Congress does not enshrine the right to abortion in the law, state legislatures may further penalize women for their own reproductive decisions, which, let me be clear, are best made by a woman in consultation with her physician, her family, her friends, and in line with her own religious and moral values, and are not to be predetermined by law. The state should not be mandating how to govern the bodies of women. Friends, the time for such patriarchal systems of governance have no place whatsoever in modern society. As a multi-religious society, it is important that no religious tradition impose its moral or ethical values on those of other religious beliefs, but they are free to practice the values of their own faith without mandating it for others. I call upon the US Congress to work expeditiously to enshrine in the law the right of a woman to make her own reproductive decisions based on the medical advice, input of her own family and friends, as well as her own religious and moral values. Shalom, salam, peace, and fateh.
Thank you so much. We appreciate your powerful words and joining us tonight. Next up, we will hear from Rabbi Barry Silver, Esquire, founder of Cosmic Judaism, Uniting Science and Religion. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you. And I am very interested in what everybody else has to say. We do have to work together, and we do have to acknowledge that people of color and the poor are disproportionately affected. What I haven't heard from anyone, and almost never hear in this discussion, even from the rabbis, is how it affects Jewish people and the unfairness to Jews. And it would be great to hear from people who are not Jewish about this, but I haven't yet. So I will. I also want to lament the long guidelines that were issued about what we should say. I don't think that's healthy to tell people what to say. I think the problem is that we have been too polite and too kind in the face of a relentless effort to bring about a religious theocracy. And we Jews know that when you're very timid in the face of evil, it ends up very badly. So let me just say, as a rabbi, that the effort by some Christians to use the Jewish Bible to distort it beyond recognition, to turn the teachings of Jesus on their head, and then enforce it back on the Jewish people and try to force us to accept their misguided notions, and to dictate to us what it means to consider life sacred, as if we don't know, and to tell us what our Torah means, as if we don't know. The Torah says that life begins at birth. God formed human beings and breathed the breath of life into them. Ezekiel, he breathed in the dry bones. There's many other passages indicating that the fetus is considered part of the mother. This is Jewish law. The law that we have now in Florida criminalizes Jewish law. We choose in Judaism the woman over the fetus. The fundamentalist Christians take the fetus over the woman every time. And we do not believe that life begins at conception. That's a misconception. And there's a pregnant silence in Jewish and Christian scripture regarding abortion. It's silent, which means that these two documents, Jewish and Christian scripture, are significantly pro-choice documents. And it's chutzpah for people who can't even read Hebrew to tell us what our Torah means. If these folks want to be pro-life, let them join us in fighting for universal health care, getting rid of all these assault weapons, protecting our precious planet, and not forcing casual sex to lead to birth. That is not sanctity of life. That is treating life cavalierly. We are encouraged in the Jewish faith by people like Tuvia Bilski, who said, freedom begins with an act of defiance. Together we will win. Together, united, we'll never be divided. Juntos unidos, jamás vencidos. Toujours unis, nous sommes bénis. Always together we are blessed. Together united, we can't be beaten. And kulanu yachad, en lanu pachad. If we're all together, we are not afraid.
Thank you, Rabbi Barry. Next, we will hear from Minister Siobhan Williams, the organizing ambassador in Georgia for Faith and Public Life. Minister Siobhan, welcome.
Thank you. And it's been great to be on and hear everyone and all these people of faith to speak today. And what I want to say today is elections have consequences. This is what came to mind as I listened to the news of the Supreme Court's ruling, rolling back Roe v. Wade, which was at its best the very basic and lowest right of decision-making bodily autonomy that was given to everyone by God. This was a devastating decision that have ignored the ideas of the majority in our country, including the majority of people of faith. As a minister of the gospel, a retired physician assistant, and a Black mother, the decision to start or expand your family is one that is very sacred and personal that should be made by an individual and their healthcare provider. There is no room for politics or politicians to be in the mix. My work in ministry, as well as my work in advocacy, takes me throughout Georgia, particularly rural Georgia and the Black Belt of Georgia. This ruling will disproportionately harm Black and Brown people, especially those experiencing poverty or without the means to travel for necessary care. Here in Georgia, it is very dangerous to be pregnant, as we have one of the highest maternal mortality rates. But to be Black and pregnant in Georgia is even more dangerous, as the maternity mortality rate is 2 times of the white counterparts here in Georgia and 6 times the white counterparts nationally. I think of this, and knowing many of the rural communities I work in, folks have experienced closures of hospitals and lack of access to even primary health care. Our communities already experience lack of access to emergency health care. And this ruling, and then the heartbeat bill that's in litigation in Georgia, will further decrease access to abortion care and overall reproductive care and justice. Also, the criminalization of abortion care and abortion care providers will also further harm Black people, Black communities, because our criminal justice system here in Georgia is already rooted in inequity. So I started off my comments by saying elections have consequences. We're at this place with an access to abortion care being denied for so many because of the many elected officials that have failed to listen to the voices of the people in the very communities that elected them to office. As a minister, I will continue to pray for and with and hold space for anyone that finds themselves needing to make such an important and personal decision. But as an advocate, I will continue to mobilize people of faith all over Georgia to get out and vote for elected officials that are committed to passing important legislation that will improve access to all necessary care, that would expand Medicaid in Georgia so that 500,000 folks will have access to affordable health care, that will help push to open hospitals in rural Georgia to improve the outcomes of adverse emergent events. This is how I walk out my faith. This is how I walk out the mandate to love my neighbor. And in this fight, I'm going to keep hope because I believe light will win. I believe the dignity of all will be affirmed by legislation that expand, not limit our freedoms. Legislation that will affirm our own ability to make our sacred and personal decisions regarding our body autonomy. I thank you. I thank you for all that are listening, and I lament with, and I continue to pray for. Up next, I have the honor, though, of introducing the Reverend Senator Kim Jackson. I've had the honor of our paths crossing across Georgia on both of our quests to make Georgia a better place for all. She is a senator in Georgia Senate District 41, and we will hear from her as she's a senator, a reverend, and a pastor. Reverend Kim.
Well, thank you so much for your introduction, Siobhan, and thank you to Faith in Public Life for hosting this opportunity for us to pray together and to lament together. I am reminded of a sacred song from our tradition, from my tradition, in which the psalmist or the songwriter writes, God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far on the way. Indeed, many tears have been shed over the last few days and weeks as we prepared for what we knew was coming down. And indeed, many, many more tears will be shed. And this day, we recognize that God is with us in those tears. But I'm also reminded of the fact that I come from a people who not only have put their hope and trust in a God who can hear our silent tears, but we also come from a people, and those of us who identify as women come from women folk who have found and made a way out of no way from time and time again. We are not without hope, because women for generations and generations, people who can get pregnant for decades and decades, have been able to find a way. And so this day, while we lament and we grieve, we also look towards those who've come before us and those who are walking alongside of us for a path towards freedom. This day, I find inspiration in the reproductive justice women and people that I have sat with over the last few days who've been mobilizing, not just in the last few days, but for the last years, preparing for a time when we would have to think about how we do this with and for one another in a season in which our own courts wouldn't support us. And so I am reinvigorated and made hopeful and renewed in knowing that we are a part of a great team of people who are here to help each other get to freedom. And I also want to echo what Siobhan said about our role in this work towards liberation as it relates to voting. I have the great privilege and honor of serving a congregation of people who live in Atlanta and sleep on the streets of Atlanta each night. Many of the members of my congregation are forced to participate in sex work in order to survive. Many of my congregants are not able to vote because their voting rights have been taken away from them. And the message that I offered them on Sunday and the message that I now offer to you is that we have a responsibility to one another as we fight for freedom to do whatever we can to help make sure that those who are eligible to vote, that we all get out and vote. And for those who are not eligible to vote, you get to participate in this work too, because you can help register others. And those of us who are around you can help get you so that your voting rights can be restored. Elections matter. Voting matters. If we didn't understand that before Friday, I hope we understand that today. And so I want to encourage you wherever you are to make sure that folks get out to vote. And if you happen to live in Georgia, especially, I speak as a Georgian, I speak as a Black queer woman in Georgia, I want to encourage you to please help to mobilize people. In Georgia, I happen to be a part of a movement that helped to create a pathway for people who have been convicted felonies, so to be convicted felons, for them to get their voting rights restored after serving on 3 years of probation. And so if they've completed 3 years of probation without any problems, they can get that probation terminated and have their voting rights restored. People need people to walk alongside them to get their voting rights restored. And that's a part of this work that we can do, along with leaning on this great community, this great cloud of witnesses who have fought this journey before us and who continue to empower us as we fight forward. Thank you so much for being in this journey. Our freedom is bound with one another, so let us work together.
Thank you so much, Reverend State Senator Kim Jackson and our very own Siobhan Williams. We really appreciate both of you and the work that you do there in Georgia and your leadership. We appreciate everybody who has joined us tonight, and I want to hand it over now to my colleague, Kia Smith, the VP of Communications and Digital here at Faith in Public Life. Kia?
Thank you, Sarah, making sure I am unmuted. The past few days, the past few weeks have been a lot. We've all been physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually drained as we deal with the impact that this decision will have in our communities. So I'm so very grateful for this space, for us to gather, grieve, and reground ourselves for the work that is ahead. As we leave this space, I'm taking with me the words of Reverend Jackie, who reminded us of the fierce power of love. Reverend Katie, who reminded us to live out our shared values of compassion, justice, and love in our work for reproductive freedom. Rabbi Bonnie, who called us to not stand idly by while our neighbor bleeds. and Bishop Tanya, who challenged us to lament in a way that drives action through our tears. I hope you also leave this space feeling renewed as we move. And as we move forward, my prayer is that you don't forget to take care of yourselves as you take care of and minister to others. Please take a minute to visit faithandpubliclife.org/cryloudpostrow. If you are watching on that page and scroll down a little below, there is a form. Please fill out that form and let us know what you need, what your community needs, and what you would like elected officials to know in this moment. Your feedback will ensure that we're able to resource you with what you need and amplify your voices to those in the halls of power. I'm so grateful to be a part of this multi-faith and multiracial coalition of clergy and faith leaders as we continue to use our prophetic voices and bold actions to be co-creators with God and build communities where we can all live with the dignity, autonomy, and the well-being God desires for us all. Amen. Ashe. It is so. Thank you for joining us, and good night.